Hello and welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers podcast. My name is Chris Armstrong, and today I am joined by Rachel Kibler,
Howdy.
Tara Walton,
Hello.
and the great Russell Craxford.
Hello, they're not so great.
Well, I think you're great. This week we are going to be talking about change for good. And we'll get a little bit more into what we mean by that in a wee bit. But Rachel has for us some banter. So over to you, Rachel.
Okay. So, if you are asked to bring a side dish to a potluck and you know nothing about anyone else who's going to this potluck, what are you bringing?
The first question, what's the
For me,
potluck?
oh my goodness. Oh no. A potluck is where everyone brings someone cooks a main dish who's hosting, and then everyone brings food along with it. So, like a side dish or a dessert. What is
Okay.
that called in the UK?
Could be called the same thing. I've just never been to one.
Like a bring and share sort of thing, maybe. I don't know. It sounds
Okay,
great.
well, we're gonna have to host a potluck at the testing Pierce.
So I'm going to get really American on you. There is a dish in Utah, where I'm from, that's called funeral potatoes. They're like hash browns and chicken broth and cream and then covered in cheese and potato chips. And it's like heart attack in a casserole dish, and it's amazing. So that's what I'm bringing, just because it's a perennial favorite, um, unless you can't do dairy or chicken broth. So I'm discounting vegetarians and people who can't do dairy.
So I would do bread. I like making bread, ciabatta in particular. So I'd probably make something of that ilk. I'm assuming that counts as a side
Lovely.
dish.
It does.
I am an avid baker, and I usually end up bringing cupcakes, but not like bake sale style cupcakes where they're just frosted, but like the fancy ones that have fillings and yeah,
Ooh.
So it sounds
cupcake
good
war
already, doesn't it?
style cupcakes.
Do love food. Maybe we'll just talk about that for the rest of the episode. Um, I've got a hot and a cold because depending on how much time I had, perhaps like I might just grab a packet of something. I just want to say I love Jaffa cakes, and Jaffa cakes can stand alone as a side dish at a bring and share dinner when people pick a tea. If you don't know what those are, Rachel, they
No.
are they're sold in the biscuit aisle. Biscuits in Europe, not in the States. And but they're actually like legally distinct for tax reasons to biscuits, as in fact cakes, because why not? And so it's a small circular soft cake, light cake, with a little jelly orange disc on top of it, and then a dark chocolate covering on the top. And they are Moorish, I think is the word I would use. I could eat a whole packet incredibly quickly. So those things, if you come over to Europe, they do sell a variety of them in German supermarkets. I've been assured by Cassandra. So if you're over in Germany for Agile testing days, there is a chance. In fact, if I make it to Agile testing days, I'll bring some from Britain, which are better. But if it was going to be a hot dish, I'm probably going to go down the route of like melted cheese topped garlic bread.
Ooh,
And I'd
good
make the garlic
call.
bread. I'd do it all myself. I might even make the bread myself. Why the hell not? Because that way you
I
get to
love
put more garlic, more butter, and more cheese.
I love how we all just went straight for the carbs. Like we're like
I don't no idea what the
Potatoes,
main's even
bread,
going to be.
sugar.
Who
who
eats the
cares?
main?
We'll
I was
load
gonna
up
say.
on carbs.
Love it. Well,
Oh,
thank you. That concludes the banter.
that would be a change for the better. I think that would
Not
be
the
so.
waistline,
So
but yeah.
well, it depends on you. I mean, maybe change for the batter. So
Oof.
whatever. But trying desperately to cling to a link to the theme of the episode. I proposed today that maybe we talk a little bit about existing in teams that perhaps there's a bit of discontent. Perhaps, listener, you are in a team and there's some people who are more than a little cheesed off. Maybe their work isn't seen. Maybe they haven't been included. Maybe they've been given work too late that's incredibly urgent. Maybe people think they can do their job for them. Maybe there's historical context for why people have given up. So the proposal for today is, hey friends, hey peers, what do you do when you walk into a team where it isn't all sunshines and rainbows?
Well, the easy option is to walk straight back out. I'm not saying we would.
Is it easy? Have you seen the job market this year?
I
The
guess it
job
depends.
market alone is like, woo, time to
It
buckle
depends, I
up
guess.
because it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it depends if the team is a permanent sort of team or if it's a team that's transient. You know what I mean? A fixed team versus a temporary team. But yes, I get your point. If it's transient, then you would, if it's not transient, then you would need to actually try and change the culture, change the situation you're in for the better. So yes.
So I actually have a thing that I've been using the last couple times that I've changed teams, which is a WTF list. What the freak? There we go. So you join the team and you just start writing down all the stuff that absolutely confuses you about like why are they doing this kind of thing manually, or why are they coming into the office when, like only one person is taking an entire conference room and everyone else is at their desks, things like that. Or it could be that one person is always asking for help and can't get through why. Can't get through what? Can't get through a thing. So just writing down all the things that confuse you, or that maybe their code repos are terrible and you're like, WTF. And then you as a person can see if there are any low-hanging fruit that you can just solve for them, areas of pain that you can just solve. And then once you've solved what you can, then you look at whether something is a technical challenge or a people challenge. If it can be solved by expertise, just not your expertise, or whether it involves influence that needs to enact change, like enable people to change. And then the technical challenge is usually fairly simple to solve. Just find the right person. The people challenges, the adaptive challenges, take a little bit more finesse and influence, and I don't have a simple solution for that. But that's a model that I've used the last few times that I've changed teams, and it's been pretty effective. And I've encouraged people who have joined after me to also compile their WTF list and present it to the team and see what we can do to make things just suck a little bit less each time.
Are there any gotchas that you would sort of have in those bits when presenting, or do you share your WTF list with people, I assume?
It depends. So the first time that I did it, I had some very sensitive egos on my team that I didn't want to be like, well, this person doesn't collaborate. So I kept a list for myself and I shared my list with my manager, and then shared a lesser list, a smaller list with the team of like, here are things that don't involve egos, but why are we doing it this way? And things like that. So
But
you have to be
a good
sensitive.
filter, a good
Yeah.
filter for those things, which a bit of spatial awareness. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what I've tried.
I really like the transparency of that, if you are, especially if you're able to share it. Because I feel like so often we end up kind of complaining to one or two trusted people and then nothing ever comes of it, except for like the trauma bonding that happens when you're complaining about the same stuff. But I think it opens up the capability of making those culture changes that are so hard to do.
I'm gonna say I've never heard it called WTF, but I kind of get the pattern that you're talking about because think I've tried similar ones, but I've just never given it a name. But it was kind of more or less kind of defining things that were easy to change, that needed minimal support was the way I framed it. Things that were going to be hard to change, but could be changed with some support. And then things that were going to be very hard to change, which was more the influencing other people. Like, let's say you work in a place that's got fixed rules, HR across the whole business, that you know that to change that sort of policy or that rule or that thing would be possible, but it isn't going to be something you do by just instructing somebody. It's going to be influence, arguments, putting forward a case, an exemplar, and so on, doing a trial and those sorts of things. But kind of going through it with teams of people when I've led them about asking them what are the challenges and kind of getting the feedback using kind of like retrospective techniques, for want of a better word, to gather that. Ask the whys, like why is it important? Why does it matter? Why are we doing it like that? Asking, making sure you've got the history, because I know I've tried to do things before where I didn't get the history, and if I paused just a little bit to get it, I would have known that someone very similar did a similar thing and it burned to a crisp. And so everyone's got social scars and scars about that idea. They don't necessarily disagree with it. They quite like the idea of it, but as a company or as a cultural thing, you're going to get resistance left, right, and center from the delivery managers, from the devs, from this and that and the other, because, oh, we tried something similar and didn't work. Or our app's so unique it can't do it here, and things like that. And if you don't listen, you don't get the context, which means you can't frame things to the point I think Chris was making about framing things correctly in a way that can get you buy-in to making that change. Because I don't know about many of you, but it's commonplace that new managers come in with new ideas that want to try and influence change, that want to put a spin on things to their world. And even if you're not the leader, if you're a leading personality, you often want to try and fix things, improve things. I know that wherever I go, whatever I do, I want to make things better. It's just who I am. So even if I'm not the boss, I'm kind of interested in seeing where the pain points are. Because a new face or a new person in a context often sees the actual pain rather than just the workarounds that people have applied. Because the amount of times I've gone, we do this like this, and I would go, why? There's a shorter route to doing that. So the new face is often quite good at spotting anomalies that the existing people have just accepted as business as usual, for want of a better word. So yeah, so that's kind of the model, but it's pretty much exactly the same thing you're talking about, just different framing to it, I think.
As far as the influence goes, the people challenges, there are a couple of resources that I really love. They both come out of, well, one is Everyone Can Lead, and the other is Your Leadership Edge. And both books are written by Ed O'Malley, who came from the Kansas Leadership Center, because why not? We were talking about the Midwest before we started recording, and yeah, they have great stuff. But they talk about adaptive challenges, those people challenges, and how to both get your context and get into like speaking to loss. If we've tried this before, have we tried this in this way that will also engage more people or things like that? So those are two books that I highly recommend, both by Ed O'Malley, if you just look them up.
I'll make sure that I take those down and put them in the show notes for the listeners. That's really, really good shared resources. I was thinking about coming back to one of the things Tara said about the bonds we make with our colleagues when we've got the shared trauma. Those bonds are actually like legit, aren't they? Like there are people that I'm still friends with, and we went, we were in the trenches, we were doing these horrible, vile things, and that's great. And but you can get that can be a bit of a trap sometimes, can't it? It can be a bit of a like it's a safe space. I've got my closure because we went and had a coffee and had a bitch about person X, process Y, project Z, and that's it's kind of it's a short term fix, and it's that thing that we have to sort of resolve that for now, but it's not a sustainable fix ever, is it? And I sort of think about when I've got into those close personal relationships, and I'm still friends with people that I've been in those situations with, but retrospect is an interesting thing that Russell brought up, and he's like, what could we have done differently? Did I feel empowered? Did I speak with the right people? What could I have tried? And it's not, I'm not in a position of regret when it comes to those things, but it does sort of make me wonder, would the day have been less rubbish each day if somehow there'd been less of an acceptance of how it is and doing stuff? But that comes sort of laced into things we talked about, sort of psychological, psychosocial safety in the workplace. Do we feel empowered to speak up? What happens when people do? Have you worked in places where people have tried to change stuff and then been blamed, quietly moved out, things like that? It's a really interesting dynamic because working in a place of fear, which I'm reading that generationally speaking, the sort of younger workforce than the group of us. This peek behind the curtain for the listeners. We're not in like in our 20s sadly anymore. But I know our voices sound well reasoned and youthful. But anyway, I sort of read the other day that they're saying that this is a generation of cling to your jobs because of the job market, because of the change, because it's better to be employed than unemployed rather than improve yourself, improve your brand, make a change of where things are. It's better just to be there, get through the crap, and maybe somehow you'll be seen and rewarded. And that doesn't feel like a culture that's going to breed people looking for the art of the possible
or
and,
change.
and, and embracing cultural improvements and continuous improvements. And so therefore it feels even more incumbent upon us to set a standard, talk about how, share methods, not just these wonderful transparent things that we can do to unlock finding out why, a bit of discovering things, but what can I do about that?
I think for me, it's always been really important to walk away from those conversations with an action item. Like it's not in my purview to change. It's not something I can change. But when it is, what are we going to do about it? And who do I need to involve? What are the stakeholders, etc. So it's almost like treating it like a feature or a bug that has come across your desk, and I go through that same kind of process of like, okay, but now what?
Coming out with tangible things is always a better outcome. Like even if you go and as Chris was saying, and you're like talking to a friend and sharing a problem and bouncing ideas is a better way than just complaining. The answer to your point, Tara, it could well be there isn't anything we can do. It could be there is something we can do. It could be all sorts of different things. But you're better off trying to see what's possible, what sort of feedback you can get, what you can actually kind of come out as an action. And then, as you said, that action could be, I'm going to try to not let this impact me. Or I'm going to speak to my line manager about this, or I'm going to feed back on the next staff survey. These things impact me because if enough people do this, maybe there will be organizational change. I'm going to speak to a union about it if you're unionized and so on and so forth. But, sitting on your hands is probably the expression I'd use. You've got to do something because it'll just ruminate. And it could be an active choice to do nothing, but it has to be active. That's the thing that makes the difference. Otherwise, it's just
I
completely
love that.
moan session all the time. But you've got to accept it. You've got to have a moment to complain about it. You can try and make it a little less painful. Doesn't mean you can stop it being painful to you, whatever's going on. It could be trust of a manager micromanaging you. You can do a lot to try and influence them, but you can't probably stop them being a micromanager without grievance processes and all sorts of complexities. But you can try and influence which bit they're looking after, which bits you take ownership of. You can try and give them candid feedback that you work best with a different style. It doesn't mean they're going to listen, and that could also be frustrating because that winds me up more than anything else, people not listening. But if you don't try, that also winds me up. So personally, it's like the ability to try and influence change is far more valuable to me than succeeding. To your point about sort of people accepting where they are, you can accept where you are and still try and make change. You don't have to someone say something offensive to you and slap them in the face. There's more diplomatic ways of dealing with conflict, challenging policies and all those sorts of things. But I kind of brought up with the mantra that if you do nothing, then don't expect anything to change. So you're just accepting it. And that can be a valid to do nothing and accept it, but you have to accept it. To do nothing and then keep moaning about the same thing or complaining about the same thing is frustrating. But again, going back to the earlier thing, there's some things that you have little control over. The classic one of late that I keep coming back to is office working, where everyone went remote for COVID. And then there's been a big drive for lots of companies to drive towards you must come into the office. Now, if lots of people speak up, you can influence that to a degree. But ultimately, someone somewhere is sitting in a chair saying, I want X. So, and it's often not your line manager. It's often not the people that you have influence over. It's often outside of that. And you've got two options: accept it, give feedback on it, talk about the disruption of it, give examples of why it's not a good idea. And the other option is vote with your feet. I know a lot of people don't, in which case you have to learn to accept it. Or the other option is you willfully don't accept it, but then you have to wait until you might get disciplined. You don't go to the office, but at some point someone might tell you off for that. They may not disagree with what you're doing, but if there's a rule of play at work, you might get told off for it. So you have to accept that. If you complain about it, and that's the rules and things like that, it's hard, but sometimes you have to follow the process to a degree. But anyway, I
It's
ramble.
a lot to unpack there, isn't there?
Sorry.
Because there's safety, there's navigating a workplace, there's consequences, there's sharing, there's actions and what the consequences to those actions or those not actions might be. There's stuff around protecting your peace because you might not be in a place where actions actually are useful. The world is a wildly different place. No, every single place you go into. And yeah, there's so many good points that you draw in there. I just
Sorry, overwhelmed you.
like there's just no, but there's no, but there's no, there's. I mean, ultimately, you coming in is that there's lots of interesting and good, useful tips and tricks, but it's kind of it's a context thing, right? Because
Depends, yeah.
where you are at, where your positioning is, where the company's at, what their culture is at, what their constraints are at, like navigating that and the discovery of uncovering what is in that culture, what is behind those decisions, that positioning, why people are feeling the way that they are, why you feel the way that you do, and all of that, all of those bits feed into what you do. So there's an awful lot of resilience required in a human who's just discovering a lot of things.
Mm.
I do think it's an attitude thing. It's all about taking control of your own destiny, and whether that is acceptance in the moment and preparing yourself for something else, or whether that's making changes, stating that you want change. It's all, it's very empowering to me to realize that I have agency in that and can choose to stay in a situation, even if I don't really have a choice, to say, but this is what is best for me now. This is what is best for my family right now that I have job stability. Even if it's a reframing. If you can frame it as this is my choice and this is what I'm going to do for now, even if it's grin and bear it, just that that changes a lot of things for me.
It's often not easy, is it? That's the other things with that.
No.
Yeah.
The damned if you do, damned if you don't
It's-
type model to this sort of thing,
Well,
because both are hard.
especially if you have that personality type of being like a perfectionist or a fixer, like you're more drawn to that side of things. And I think
Like most
probably a lot of
testers.
us that are in the testing space are in that bucket.
Yep.
And so learning to be like, okay, this is not as high a priority as I thought, or being able to go to a manager or somebody that works under us and say, this is what I'm struggling with. Help me reframe it, or what can you take off my plate, or any of those things, to be like, this doesn't get fixed, I'm gonna burn out real quick.
There's an ally thing there as well, isn't there? People you can share with. And I don't know about how this works for you. I feel incredibly life is easier when I'm advocating for somebody else than for me. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
got I got
Thousand
I
thousand
got I
percent.
got I actually got called out for this at a Eurostar conference one year by Sana because I was complaining about something to do with the AV and I wasn't doing anything about it. And then the minute somebody else was having a problem, I went I went straight over to the AV person to sort out, and she's like, "You're such a weird and complex human. Stop being so British and just sort your own stuff."
But it's
And she
true
was
though.
right.
It is much easier to be an advocate. Well, personally, it's much easier to be an advocate
Oh,
of other people. As a leader, I find fighting for other causes harder, easier,
mm.
sorry, than fighting for my own self.
Here, take my advice. I'm not using it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat a lot of the time. But one thing that I did do, okay, I'm gonna shamelessly brag about my shameless channel. So at work, in Utah, we have a very humble state of mind for the residents who live here. And it can, in my opinion, go a little bit too far into where they will not talk about anything positive about themselves in a public forum. So I decided that I was going to be a bull in a china shop and create a channel where that is exactly what people do. It's called Shameless. You are expected to shamelessly brag. So people throw in there all sorts of things about the cool stuff that they're doing on their teams or in their personal lives. We had a woman competing for a spot on an Olympic on the Olympics team for the speed skating, and so that was like all over the channel. Some people post when they're helping out, like leading a girls' camping trip or whatever, for at-risk youth. So it's just really cool and vibrant and gives people a way to change the culture and see what other people are doing really around them.
Sounds good.
I
I love
love
that.
that. I have a boss. Hi, Jen. She loves to have What's Good Wednesday. So even if we don't have our meeting on Wednesday, if we end up bumping it up or down the week, she's like, okay, we have to take a minute before we do anything else. Tell me what's good. And so it's our own little way of being like, okay, work might suck, but here's this really cool thing that happened, or here's this thing that I finally finished, and I'm so glad to be done with this task, or whatever is good for you that day to
I
help
think
spin that positive and put a smile on your face before we get into all the other stuff.
I think sort of positive affirmations and shouting about your successes is something I've seen certainly within our communities that we've not been the greatest advocates for. There's always some exceptions, but I think it's possibly by our training where we're about finding problems or opportunities, maybe. I should reframe it. But we're often seen in a negative light, so we start treating ourselves in a negative light, which is kind of an affirmation circle where negativity sort of goes on and on and on. Obviously, it's not there's exceptions to that and so on and so forth, but I think there's a lot more sort of negative thinking patterns and behavioral patterns within the test community than with, say, the creative communities out there, because we don't see ourselves as creative, even though a lot of what we do is still quite creative. It's just framed as finding fault rather than supporting brilliance in a different way. So we get trapped in our own sort of negative spirals, for want of a better word.
Do you feel like with the memes and the way that people look at QA in general as being kind of the naysayers and the people that break software, that kind of becomes the way you eventually look at your job or you look at yourself, regardless of if that's where you started?
I think a lot of that presentation seeps into a lot of individuals, and the more it seeps into them, the more reaffirming it is. I don't think it gets everywhere and everyone. I think some people challenge it, which is really positive, but it's the natural. The jokes, even at work, they're not meant to be horrible and offensive. They're like, "Oh, you found fault again. Oh, you found another bug. Oh, don't let the tester look at it before it goes out because they'll find problems." Those little things aren't meant to be horrible. They aren't meant to be catastrophic, but they layer upon layer upon layer that impact, I think, the psyche, for want of a better word, of a lot of the test community that starts thinking of things as in a bit more negatively than others. I don't think we're all negative, don't get me wrong, but I think it just adds a little extra reinforcement that drives us slightly as the needle towards that negative perspective on our roles, our jobs, that then compounds it with problems and other things. We're often also in a group, let's say a development team, we're the one or two voices out of the seven. So even when we do try and challenge and things like that, often the allies are not as natural for us. They exist still, and the developers can often be great allies, but there's often sometimes a little bit more friction to get people on side, depending on the culture, again, depending on the context. I've worked in teams where the devs were more advocates of testing than the testers, but in the majority of times, it's not always like that. The culture definitely changes, and different teams it is different. But I would say that on the law of averages, it averages more towards negativity, fighting a little bit harder, feeling the victim, feeling like you're the minority, because often you are, but it doesn't mean you haven't got allies in the community.
And just underappreciated.
Yeah,
Right?
overworked.
Underappreciated. If you're getting little microaggressions that are, even if they started off as a joke, but now you're a little tired and now you're a little burnout. I've heard that joke every release. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's those little
It'll
things,
wear
but
you down.
they do drive that negativity. And then with all the other worldly problems that come into existence about process, systems, businesses, it makes it a little bit more challenging to deal with change, to deal with friction, potentially for people in these sorts of roles. Because you're seeing the negative, the world around you is seeing negative. So raising problems, well, that's just reinforcing the issue, isn't it? But I do think if you want to see change, then if you want to see improvement of quality, you don't go, oh, I found a bug, I'll just hide it. They don't really want to know about it. No, they do. That's really why they're paying you. They're making jokes, they're kind of pretending these things and they're saying these things, but they actually do value what you do. They're just terrible at articulating it. Actually, virtually every developer I've met doesn't want to release buggy software because it represents them. So
We're very human, aren't we? That's the problem.
Yeah.
We're very fallible and very human, and we're not always particularly logical.
No.
So messy.
Yes, who would be human, eh? Bring home the AI. No, don't, people, don't. I take that back.
Russell.
I think when I start to feel like my team is getting a little bit down on me or what I offer, I try to remind them that it's better when I find it than like pulling our production to a halt. And then that kind of can help shift things of like, we want to find things earlier. Like you said, Russell, you do want to present your stuff in the best light possible. And it's better when I find it than when our customers do or when our users do. And that has helped reset things a few times when I just remind them that we're all on the same team. It doesn't need to be adversarial in anything more than a joking fashion. Like, sanitize your inputs, people.
I think there was one thing we mentioned a little bit, which is leaders, line managers, being supportive of your people, asking them what's the trouble is, what changes causing them friction, what is hurting, what would they do if they were in your position, open questions like that to show that you're listening, that you care, making sure that if someone does pass on feedback about something that's not working at a slightly larger level, yes, you as a leader may not be able to change it, but pass on the feedback. Don't be the death of it, I think is the best way I can do it. You're much more of an advocate. If I use the example of office working, if 10 people complain to me about office working, and I know I'm not likely to change it, I don't just go absorb it all, because that then actually is harder on me as a leader. I've got to take that on. That weight is on my shoulders then. But you've got to then speak to the people that influence. You've got to feed that back to the HR channels. You've got to speak to some other managers even, write a reason why it's going to be more impactful for your team than it is others. My case, for example, I've got teams that are in 6 different offices. So coming together to work in one office isn't a benefit because they've got no actual teammates in the same office as them. They've got people that do the same job, so there's community theoretical benefit, but this massive benefit of, oh, well, you can sit and work with people. It's like, no, one's in Leeds, one's in Manchester, one's in Blackpool. I can't. So it's kind of one of those things. So it's giving framing to it, giving a voice to making sure that information's passed on. And further up the chain, it goes the same. You're there to represent and support everyone. So make sure that if you do get feedback, you do share it, you do advocate for it. You may not agree with it all, but it's still someone that you represent's feedback. It's a problem they're having, impact they're having. So you should be a good advocate for them, regardless if it's 3 chains below you or anywhere else. Your job is to kind of help make sure your people are heard.
Don't try and do everything yourself is another thing. You know, you have a certain amount of bandwidth. There are hills that you shouldn't die on. Pick and choose things. Try and read the room. Test the water. Push some doors. As a
Risk
leader or
assessments.
someone that's desperate to try and make change and make positive bits. Like I was reminded the other day about the beginning of Ted Lasso, and he's come in as a American football coach, taking on an English football team, and he's a laughing stock, and he hasn't got any of the players believing in him. He gets a suggestion box, and people just mostly tell him that he's an expletive, and then an expletive, and then an expletive, then an expletive. But one person puts a suggestion in saying the shower pressure's rubbish, the water pressure in the shower's rubbish, and there's all this sort of stuff goes by. After a match, they get absolutely smashed. It's awful. He goes in bad mood, goes and has a shower. Water pressure's good, and there's just a little switch. Ah, it might not be a big win, but it makes a cultural shift to say that I was able to complain about something to someone who heard me, and we move forward. It's not all of the things. It's not dramatic. You can't boil the ocean or whatever those things are, but there are ways and means that you can bring people on that journey with you. And I think that's a really important thing to do, because being a change agent isn't being an individual doing everything by themselves. And if you are, you're probably setting yourself up to fail.
Uh, I know that one of the things that I have historically struggled with at many of the places that I have been, including outside of tech, has always been kind of managing up, right? When you're low on the totem pole, when you are that new person on a team and you have your WTF list. Yes, I would love to knock some of these things off, and some of them might be with minimal support. Now, how do I get people to support and then be accountable for those changes, right? Even when I've been at the top of the food chain, the accountability seems to be one of the hardest things.
Well, it's like if just the team are going around trying to fix everything themselves. I worked in a company where the software team were trying to be so agile, so efficient, so iterative, but we were downstream of an incredibly rigid and linear way of working, that it didn't matter how agile and lean and perfect we were. We were still part of a big machine. That context was missing. And everyone was going, we just need to be more agile. We need to be more Spotify. We were making oscilloscopes, people. We didn't need to be more Spotify. And our context and our constraints were different. And just making ourselves wonderfully refined and optimized was never going to fix things. And if anything, it was going to irritate us even more, because we couldn't do any more in our own little kingdom.
Can't get the idea of
Yes.
oscilloscopes playing music out of my head now. Being more
Oh,
Spotify
well,
in that
oscilloscopes,
sense.
of course, waveforms. You can
Yeah.
see all the music, my friend. Just remember your old Windows Media Player and all the
Oh, good old days.
crazy
But
beats. You know
you're
it.
right, and there's a lot of system thinking, and it's about not trying to optimize one part of the process, but actually thinking about the whole system. And let's face it, testing is only a small part of a whole system. Valuable software is the ultimate goal. It has some value to someone who's paying for it, be it a customer at the end of the day, be it kind of the business as itself, some value to somebody that matters. So you've got to think of the whole system. And yeah, you can optimize things inside that, but a lot of the time the constraints are outside of the immediate task you're doing. So if you just focus on the narrow, you impact the wider. But going back to our earlier points, you can't change everything from every position, if that makes sense. So whilst do look to optimize, you've just got to think of the wider optimization and the feedback of where your optimizations make sense. Like you can make your automation run in 10 minutes. Great, but you're still going to release every 3 months. You go, well, what's the value? And the value is still faster feedback. We know if the build's broken faster. It still does give value. It's just not going to impact your release cycle if that's what you were trying to do. It might in the future, it lays the foundations for it, but it doesn't equal directly that you're going to release every day or do continuous delivery, because you actually need other stakeholders engaged, involved, trusting. But it could be a building block.
I like the idea of building blocks. That gives me a nice visual when you think about talking about shifting changes that might seem so incredibly massive, like changing an complete culture of a company or a team. That's a hard undertaking. But I could change this tiny process here. And if that works really well, then maybe the next process will go a little bit better. And then maybe somebody will get excited by that small win and think, what can I do to help? Right?
Exactly that. And it's like, oh, the opportunities it can open. It's like, oh, well, if you can do that, then maybe we can do this. Or I didn't think that was possible. So maybe this other thing I didn't think was impossible was. And it starts, and it can just be, as Chris said, the shower. A little thing about it's annoying, it's frustrating. It could be a check that you have to get done that doesn't really have any point these days because the person just goes, yeah, tick, without even looking at it. But that's the process. So, by changing that, and that could actually cause a 3-hour delay because it's one person who's fixed, who's in the US, for example, and you're in the UK, so they come online at 3 p.m. your time, and so on and so forth. But by removing that one little tick on a list of checklists, you could do that. And it could be by automating it, a conversation with them. There's so many ways of doing it. But just that little bit less friction can start. It won't solve the world. And this is the thing, it's about expectation management. But it can be that, oh, I didn't think anyone ever changed that. I never thought Dave would release this check. But actually, by talking to Dave, by explaining what it is, the value and the impact it's having, and asking, is there any other way of doing it? And actually getting an answer that, oh, yeah, if you put these automated checks in, all I ever do is look for them. Okay, well, tell you what, how about we send you a report and then you tell us, because we're not going to release for 3 days afterwards anyway. So you can check for 3 days, and if there's a problem in those 3 days, you tell us. Yeah, it's fine by me. It's odd how you can get acceptance by people sometimes for the most weird things that you didn't think was possible. And also the opposite's true. How some things you think should be really easy to change have annoyingly hard obstacles that have no rhyme or
So
reason.
true.
I have a dev whose policy is if you're going to make me do this more than 3 times, I'm going to automate it. So our build process is so automated. You move a Jira ticket and it creates the PR for you because he was tired of doing that. It's incredible. But we try to celebrate all those little small wins, but he raises the flag of like, no, this is annoying. I have to push too many buttons. Stop it.
That's
We're gonna fix
that's
that.
lovely dependability. I'm
Ooh,
here
I
for that.
will throw the devil's advocate moment in that as I've been the new person on teams like that, and none of that thing is documented or written down, and my WTF list is so long because I don't know what just happened.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
People that do that often are also don't really want to guides to it as well. It just works. Why do you need to know why?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Or
when it
then,
doesn't
they
work,
get a new job or go on vacation or God forbid get sick and all of a sudden everything's broken and no one knows what's happening.
Yeah, we've made a whole episode of
Moral of the
Mental
story
once
is
about
that.
AI stuff. It's very sad. No AI in all of this
I,
conversation.
I guess there's always hope. There's always hope. Whether that's acceptance in yourself that things won't change because of you, or that you can light a spark, that you can be the spark for change. And you're not alone. There are people around you who will trauma bond with you or help make real change.
it's
That.
a very good point. I was going to end on one point, but yeah, it goes very nicely with that one, really, which is there's a theory, there's a book called Let Them. which is about sort of encouraging people to try and stop controlling others and instead focusing on their own happiness, their own kind of goals, themselves a little bit more. So let like people flow over you. Don't let what they do and what they control impact you. Lovely thing to say, harder to act on as always, like lots of these things, but it's certainly something that's interesting in trying to understand and letting things flow over you, some things, and understanding what you can change and so on. But on that note, we should probably end our episode because we can go on and on and on and on and on. And anyone who's listened to many of our podcasts knows I certainly can. So I will close it here and say thank you very much for joining us, listeners, and also say thank you to our team and our peers today. So thank you, Rachel, Tara, Chris. If you want to reach out to us, you want to tell us any of your wins, any of your things you want to celebrate, pick yourself up, feel free. If you want to tell us a little bit about kind of the changes you're having to deal with, things like that, ideas of topics, anything, just reach out to us at contactus@testingpeers.com. If you also want to, we are still in our Testing Peers 2026 conference season. If you listen to this before the 12th of March, there you go. Then feel free to check out the website, testingpeerscon.com. And if you want to come along, it's in Nottingham in the UK, a whole day conference. We would love to see as many of you as possible there. I think Tara is joining us all the way over from America. So she has to now set it online.
I know.
So once again, thank you all for listening. Hope it's been useful to you, and do reach out if you want to talk.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.